Hey team, welcome to the Easy Run Show. I am Eric, the E in Easy, and my co-host Zach Friedley is the Z in the Easy. Zach, why are we doing this?
Yo, so you and I chat a lot about running, and we get into these long conversations, and we just kind of nerd out, and it'd be kind of cool to merge our audiences and share those in-depth conversations that range from anywhere between geeking out about 1500-meter records
Yep.
to trail running to shoes, nutrition, pretty much everything that you can think about with running. And I think it'd be kind of cool to just share our own personal running journeys and just kind of start to build an audience.
So what are we going to talk about today? What's your topic? And then I'll tell you my topic. So we're gonna dive in. The kind of the concept of the show is going to be that we each bring a topic that's a surprise to the other person, and we're going to riff on that. So what's your topic today?
Well, I got two, and I want to see which
Yeah.
one you want to go with.
All right.
The
We
first
can
one
we
is
can
like
blend them.
I read this article recently that was talking about like the new generation of like remember at least my generation we would go out and go to bars and get drunk, and that was like our social thing that we did. And now in today's world, people are kind of ditching the bar scene and alcohol and being more conscious about what they're doing, and they're going to run groups. So like the run group explosion is happening. I think that's kind of cool. So I wanted to talk about that. And then I also wanted to talk about super shoes and how to use them and like what is going on with all that because of my own personal experience with super shoe and like what happened to me the last few months.
Yeah, I love that. Love that. All right. So my topic is going to be kind of maybe twofold as well. Is that I want to talk about the the evolution of aid stations and the efficiency of aid stations. And with my athletes, I work a lot on being efficient with aid stations. But I think in these last 2 years, we've really seen kind of the whole team concept really take over how quick and how fast people are in aid stations. And then with that, maybe discuss whether maybe more in the ultra running world, especially the 200-mile distance, are aid stations becoming too enabling for the age group runner? And I want to dive into that. And yeah, we'll just leave it at that, and we'll dive into that, and I'll explain more about it. But so
Yeah,
I
I got some
think,
opinions about that stuff too, about
yeah,
the aid
yeah.
stations. I see some stuff firsthand.
Right, exactly. And that, we'll talk about, you were just at New Zealand, Tararira, um, Trans Gran Canaria just happened, so there's a lot of F1 aid station efficiencies going on there with all these teams. So, but let's maybe dive backwards a bit, and why don't you just a quick, hey, who's Zach?
Yeah, so my name's Zach Friedley. I'm on Instagram, Trailblader, and I am in year 4 of my on contract as part of the on trail team. Yeah, my running journey, I mean, started a long time ago when I was a kid. I ran in sports for football or wrestling, but hated it and would never consider myself a runner. Running was something you did to get in shape, cardio, or you did something you weren't supposed to do, like drop the ball in football practice. So you had to do laps. So there might have been some sort of relationship of hating running and definitely would never classify myself as a runner. But this is in the like early to late 90s, where also I should probably tell everybody I'm missing my leg. So I don't have a leg above the knee and I run with a blade right now. But in the 90s, there were no blades. And so I wasn't running on like tracks and stuff. So my running journey has changed over time. And to where I'm at now, I'm training for Broken Arrow, the Ascent, and the 23K. That's a part of the Golden Trail series. And like Sierra Zinel, the New York City Marathon. So my running's evolved, but it started somewhere. So maybe somebody listening to this maybe doesn't think that they're a runner, or maybe they're out doing a group run, and you can really take it as far as you want. You can maybe shoot to race at Western States or the local 5K or just Wednesday group runs. There's no real wrong part of running. It can just kind of move around. I don't think I would have saw myself even 10 years ago getting ready to race like a Broken Arrow or Golden Trail or crewing a guy that's, getting ready to race Western states. So running can take you anywhere.
Yep. And I think that's what's so cool about why we're excited about doing this is that, I coach you, but we also collaborate on your Born to Adapt Foundation, where we do run clinics around the world, bringing together able-bodied and disabled-bodied runners, and it's just been a cool dynamic. So, that's let's this is going to be fun. So,
I
real
do got to say
quickly,
something about the Born to Adapt we just did in New Zealand, because
yeah,
you just said bringing people together, that may have a disability, that may not have a disability. And this year was the second time we'd ever been to New Zealand. Third time for me personally, but second time we've done a Born to Adapt there in the Whakawara Redwoods. Hopefully I pronounced that right.
yeah.
And we had at least 150 people in the woods. I think of those, maybe 50 people had disabilities from the age of 7 all the way to maybe like late 70s, early 80s. And these people were doing loops in the redwoods. And also we had Dan Jones, who just broke the 100K record at Tarawera, who is a Terex athlete, also was that Born to Adapt. So it's just really cool that you can intermesh these people that may never ever have crossed paths, and now they're crossing paths, and you're just kind of breaking down the barriers of society. People see a person, with like a crutch or a wheelchair or a blade. They're like, oh yeah, this is normal. People run, and that kind of changes the paradigm in the collective consciousness of the world of like, oh yeah, these people can do these things.
But it still sticks out in my mind when we were in New Zealand last year for Born to Adapt. I forget the gal's name, um, but during our event, she came up to me and she goes, "Thanks for doing this. I've never run with someone with a blade before." And she was obviously running with a blade, and it just hit me. It was like, wow, such a special moment for her. She was, a little teary-eyed, and it was just little things like that that you don't think about in the community that can go such a far way. And I think, that's just a credit to everything that you're doing with Born to Adapt. So
Yeah,
uh,
thanks. It's fun, and I feel like we're only getting going, and who knows how far we can take it.
right, right. And that reminds me, we can kind of talk about this all day, but we did an episode on just on Zach, last year, and there's a couple other videos that we have on Born to Adapt that I'll post in the show notes. So if you want to learn more about Born to Adapt and Zach, check that out when we're done with this show. But let's
And
get
one
into
quick
this show.
plug: we'll be at
Yeah.
Broken Arrow, and we'll be at Mammoth Trail Fest this year, so keep an eye out for us.
So yeah, let's speaking of Broken Arrow, is that privy information or
It's
what's
privy. We haven't put it out there yet, but I mean, it's happening. I don't know when we're going to put the show out, but any day now we'll probably release. And I think we can start sharing it anyways. People can reach out to me on Instagram at Trailblader or at the Born to Adapt account at Born to Adapt. So if you're an adaptive athlete or para athlete or disabled athlete, however you want to describe yourself, and you wanted to come do a mountain course, this is the spot.
right? Nice, nice. Yeah, I'm looking forward to hanging with you in California and running some mountains.
Yeah, California.
Good.
I think it might be the best state in America,
Yeah,
but I mean, everybody has their own favorite.
right,
Little
right.
California plug.
Good. Yeah. So we're on day 3 of a Bluebird high and dry cycle here in Jackson, and it's been nice to actually get a little spring fever and look at some of the mountains and having Broken Arrow carrot dangling out there in front of me. I actually, even though it's super nice weather, I went to the treadmill today and did 5x4 vertical repeats to start getting the legs used to some vertical. So,
So,
I'm
what events are you doing there? Have you picked them out?
well, if all goes right, I'm gonna what's it called? The Grand Slam or
Little the Iron Challenge or the Triple Crown? I forget what it's called.
yeah. So it'll be the VK, the is it 54K? I forget the exact
46,
46K, and then the third day will be the 26K.
23.
23K. See, I gotta look. Yeah, they're all a little
And they
different.
changed the
And I'll
VK to
throw in the
Ascent.
18K on Friday with Born to Adapt, right?
You're gonna do four. You're gonna race four times.
Yeah. It's always
Nice.
slow in the mountains. I won't, it'll be the first probably big mountains I'll be able to hit before we even get off the snow here in Jackson. So it'll be fun. So,
It'll be my first technical or technically first race of the season,
right.
because of my little thing I have going on with my foot that kind of ties into what we want to talk about.
All right. So let's get into the main set. Do you want to just dive into super shoes? That's a great segue.
Yeah, so I've never worn a super shoe until recently, and I loved it. I thought it was really cool, and it was like a new feeling. And I'll describe it from my perspective and like my situation, which is going to be completely unique to a lot of people. So obviously, I run with a blade, and my blade is set up for me at a certain shoe height. And the blade I currently have, so I'm also missing my leg above the knee, so I have a knee joint, and then I have the blade.
So
So
your knee joint is the blade.
no, my knee joint's separate. So the
Well,
knee joint,
but it's mechanical. It's
it's
not, you don't
mechanical.
have a knee.
I
Yeah.
do not have a knee. I've only got one human knee. And so on my blade side, there's the socket, the blade, and the knee in the middle. And they're stuck together, with these components. And so the stack height's pretty fixed for the most part. You don't want to start to tinker with it, especially being in mountains and climbing, 6,000 meter peaks. You want to have the least amount of things that can go wrong. So I pretty much keep my blade height the same and have for the last several years to like dial it into a certain shoe. And that shoe worked perfectly for me. It was the Cloud Ultra, what do they call the Cloud Peak 3? It's like the
Great.
orange and white one. Super aggressive, super technical. I've raced UTMB MCC in it, UTMB Valderan, Tarawera. It was my go-to shoe, and I loved it. And after Mammoth last year, which we did the 26K, I went down to Cotopaxi to climb Cotopaxi. And then right after that trip, we started training for the New York City Marathon. I've never done a road marathon. Normally, I'm on trails. So that was the first time that I introduced a super shoe into my quiver. And I got the Cloud Boom Strike, and it was amazing. Loved it. It was like super fast shoe, low stack height, and it was just like bouncy and amazing. So on top of that, I had to get a different blade. So I had the same model of blade, which is an Oster Exceed, but we raised it from about a 20 mil stack height to a 40 mil stack height. And I did this overnight. And I don't recommend anybody doing this, but coming from mountain racing to a marathon, I had no choice because all in all, trail running is the thing that I do. It's how I make money, and it's what my number one priority is. So after trail was over, we got the new setup, and I had like 2 days to break it in. And I ran the New York City Marathon, had a blast, and had a lot of fun. I ran it with David Kilgore. He was my pacer. We did a lot of stopping, a lot of high fiving, taking videos, but there was some fast running in there. And then after the marathon, I liked it so much that I was like, hey, let's keep doing this. I want to keep training in the shoe. I think it can help me with some speed. And then I went over to Italy because that's where we were living at the time. And I only brought one blade with me. That was the 40 mil stack height blade. So not only was I training in this thing every run, I was also walking around in this guy because of the stack height. I wanted to keep my hips the same and didn't really think much of it. And did this for like 6 to 8 weeks till around Christmas. So the New York City Marathon happens early November and Christmas. So it was probably like almost 8 weeks. Let's say 8 weeks I was in the shoe exclusively walking, running, the whole thing. And I went out for a run one day and my foot started to tingle a little bit. I wouldn't call it a pain. I wouldn't call it anything super noticeable. It just felt different. And luckily for me, I'm pretty tapped into my body, and if something doesn't feel normal, I stop. And so I stopped, and you and I talked about it. I rested for a few days, went for a run again. The little tingle came up again, within the first 5 minutes. And we tried that. We tried to like heal it on our own, and it just wouldn't go away. And yeah, so essentially, I learned that you can't wear a super shoe for every workout. You certainly definitely can't walk around in the thing as well. So you just got to be very careful about using the shoe. It's a tool. And from my experience, I think you got to microdose it and use it sparingly. It's just something that should be utilized a very probably small percentage. I mean, what do you think?
Well, I think it's important to make sure everybody out there realizes that anytime you change a shoe or change stack height of a shoe, most of us run in a variety of different shoes and stack heights, but anytime you change the height of a shoe, you have to do an overhaul with your blade.
Yeah.
So I think that that's just a really important thing for people to realize, and which kind of got you into trouble, right? Because you couldn't once you adjusted your blade, you had to wear that shoe, or you'd be kind of walking.
Yeah. I mean, coming
That
from
ain't
20
going.
mil to 40
Yeah,
mil, I mean, that's almost, if you convert that into US, it's 3/4 of an inch. I mean, that's a
yeah.
significant amount.
And that,
So,
I guess that would be the difference of someone going out and running with a shoe on and running barefoot, where you would
yeah.
kind of you just it just would be off kilter, right?
Yep.
So to did you get to your question is that I think, especially in the trail world, we've got to look at what a super shoe is. And you sent me a pair of the On shoes that you're talking about, the super shoes, and the road shoes have very, very squishy foam that has great energy return that's sandwiched in a carbon plate. In the variety of brands use different types of plates and they position them differently. But essentially, a super shoe in the road is really squishy foam with a carbon plate. And the foam, the squishy foam allows for the energy return, and the carbon plate allows there to be structure for that energy to hit the ground and rebound quickly. It's just like your blade, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And so originally, when the super shoes first came out, a lot of the what do I want to say, the purpose or the thinking around it was that the plate was providing the propulsion.
Hmm.
But what happened with all the new foams out there and the technology with the foams, it was actually the foam that's providing the propulsion and energy return. And the plate is allowing structure for that to bounce forward. In other words, if you didn't have the plate, it would be a nice squishy landing and a slow rebound. You had to have the plate in there to make it snappy. Okay. But to go where we want to go with this conversation is that now you've got something squishy that's going into something very, very rigid that in most cases is not very natural to how our feet have been conditioned. Uh,
Yeah.
so it's essentially you're you just did too much too soon because your foot wasn't ready for that rigid part of the plate in the takeoff. Um, and it's no different than going to the gym and doing something, more than you should, and you're really sore, or you end up getting injured. Whatever it is, it was you essentially overtrained your foot. Um,
Yeah. And I think I learned too. I mean, we got so many different shoes that on, and we have a training shoe that is called the 99, or I think the name they call it on the website is the Cloud. Um, I'm losing it. I'll
yeah,
have to figure,
yeah. There's so
but
many.
it's basically a training shoe without the plate.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So again, you've got to condition your foot to be prepared for that rigidity of the super shoe. And this is why now that we're seeing super shoes infiltrate the trail market, why a lot of brands are going away from the plate on trail because it makes it very, very unstable.
Yeah.
Okay. And there's a lot of new foams going to be coming out this year that provide resiliency and rebound in a good way, but they're able to not have a high stack height of the older foam. So you're closer to the ground. So now the ground becomes the plate.
Yeah.
Okay. And so again, I guess my point is with this is that you don't want that rigidity on trail because it makes it completely unstable. And then the shoe becomes really race course dependent, where you'll see a lot of bladed super shoes at like Western States because that's flat or
Fast.
it's not very it's a fast course and it's not very technical relatively speaking, whereas you get on mountain terrain and that blade's going to just toss you around and you just can't have that instability on technical terrain.
Yeah. And that shoe's called Cloud Boom Zone.
All right, you looked it up. Good.
Well, I
Yeah.
just remembered.
Well, and you sent it, and I loved it. I was doing some hill repeats on it, and it's definitely performance enhancing. So that's the super shoes do work,
Yeah.
and it's
I mean, I
uh,
dropped a minute off my mile,
yeah, yeah, and that's
basically.
that's where you gotta start slowly. It's not unlike the minimalist boom 10 years ago where just people just started doing too much too soon because it felt good.
Yeah.
You got to condition your muscles and your feet to be prepared for that plate and that rigidity. So
Here's a question for you. Do you
yeah,
think most people, when you're training, I guess it would be depending on what level you're at, but should people be training in different pairs of shoes or same shoe, or how would you approach it from somebody like, let's say, a beginner that's just picking up running?
yeah, I think the beginner is actually in the best spot because they're starting with a clean slate, a clean canvas, and now they can train their feet. Now they can, me, I'm a big proponent of training the feet to train properly the run muscles that we have all the way up through our body. And so creating um, a better platform within your feet is the holy grail from my perspective. And then you can kind of pick and choose what you need as far as shoes. But a beginner, um, like I said, they're starting from scratch, so they have the ability to build a structural foundation as they build their physiological foundation. Whereas a veteran runner, they're used to doing things a certain way, using a certain shoe, and now they're changing things that their body might just not be adapt to. And so
Yeah.
to really answer your question, I think variety, whether it's variety in training, what you're doing, or variety in shoes, is going to be the key. I
Yeah.
train my athletes on one spectrum. They train a lot in a minimal shoe to develop that strength. And then on the other end, they pick a shoe that gives them the protection and um, I guess, comfort, so to speak, for the type of racing they're doing.
I like that answer. The beginner is at a blank slate, so you
Yeah, they're
can.
coming in from the best part. Again, it's even like from a run form standpoint, when it's much easier to teach a beginner run form than it is to teach a runner who's been running for 20 years
Mhm.
because they have all this muscle memory of doing it a certain way. And if they need to overhaul it, that can be a really frustrating time for them because they have to really change what their brain is used to feeling for 20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. All right. So
What else we got to talk about? The aid stations?
yeah. What was your second topic? You had
Uh,
two.
yeah, what was my second? I think it was why um oh yeah, the culture behind drinking and now pivoting to running and like all the different things that are popping up. Which I think is really cool because I mean, when I was in my 20s, you met people at the bar. When, I grew up in the Midwest. I don't know if this is like a worldwide thing, but when you turn 21 in Kansas City, Missouri, you were hitting up the bar and you
At
planned your,
21, wasn't it 18?
now it's 21.
Yeah.
Um, well, I think maybe some places are 18. I don't know. In Missouri, once you turn 21, you go to the bar. And those were a lot of my early memories in my 20s. And you plan your weekend around it, Friday night, Saturday night. Do you go out heavy Friday night and then go light Saturday? Or do you take it easy Friday so you can have a big Saturday night? Like that was the format that we used. And I think it's cool today to see people doing the run groups. They go to bed early Friday so they can get up early on Saturday morning and go smash a long run with a group of people, and then maybe have a beer or two afterwards. But you're not going out and getting hammered. And I think it's pretty cool that's like that's happening. And I wonder, like, what was it that was the catalyst to make that happen? Like, what happened in society that people were like, hey, let's go run? Like, what do you think happened? I mean, because running's been around forever. Like, what was the big change? Was it social media and like Strava? And like, what do you think?
I think it's probably a little bit of all of that, but on our Born to Run 2 book tour, we traveled the country and each stop we hooked in with run crews
Yeah.
that already had their Tuesday night run or their,
Yeah.
Thursday night run. And, some of these groups, we went to one in Denver.
I was
And
there.
what's
BP
that?
Runco?
What's that?
Was it the BP Runco?
No, that was like the day after. But
Okay.
this was in downtown Denver, and there must have been, I'm gonna guess, 500 people.
What?
And we met at this park in downtown, and we then took off. 500 people taking off, running the bike path.
Wild.
So imagine this long um, centipede of runners basically taking over the bike path. And then we turned around and came back and ended up at a restaurant bar, and, people got drinks or food, whatever. And we did a book signing, but essentially that run crew now brought 500 people to the bar and restaurant to buy food.
Yeah.
And so it's becoming this same thing. We were in Chinatown in New York City. Same thing.
Yeah.
Hundreds and hundreds of people once a week. They're ending up at a restaurant and everybody's buying food.
That's cool.
And so it becomes this um, community thing, but also a community bonding thing with the merchants.
Yeah.
And both of those, I'm I definitely know the Chinatown one was started from COVID. To answer
Yeah. So
your
you think COVID
question.
was a
So
big factor?
I think COVID played a huge, like now all these younger kids who have good jobs are um, not able to go to work and they have a little free time and they start run crews. And
Yeah.
I think that's really was the really kind of the big blow up, across everywhere, around the world. There's a guy we're friends with in London who he was a professional 800-meter runner who his life kind of got sideways, and he was also a musician. And so he started a punk rock um, run crew.
That's cool. There's a
And
run crew
and
for
yeah,
everyone.
yeah,
Yeah. The thing that I found interesting is when I was in New York City with David Kilgore, he was telling me that there's some like crazy number, like 50 run groups registered or something. And there's one for every like time of day. There's people that get off work at like 2 a.m. and they go run at 3 a.m. And there's like a group for that. There's people that are like 6 a.m.ers. And then, late night group at like 11. There's a group for every represented kind of person, which is cool.
yep,
But I think in this podcast, it'd be cool. A little call to action to people is I am trying to start to get more disabled, adaptive people invited to run groups. So, if you're listening and you're a part of a run group, find somebody that doesn't look like you and invite them to your next run group.
Right on, right on. Love it. So, all right, should we segue to aid stations?
Yeah, I've got a lot of opinions about this. So yeah, let's flip
Yeah,
it.
so with a lot of my athletes, that's a big thing as we get closer to, again, specifically longer races. I think aid stations really become important, um, more so on the trail scene, more so on the longer distance scene, and in
Yeah,
plan
I
our
mean, there's
strategy.
races. I don't mean to overstep, but there's races that are being won by like 1 or 2 seconds on
Exactly,
trails. Like
exactly.
that.
Yeah, it's becoming a team effort, right? Everybody's got their crew and it's just getting so dialed. It's almost like an F1 aid station where these top athletes are coming in and um, you know, they may have three or four, five people in their crew, and every crew has a responsibility. One's refilling water, one's doing the ice,
Yeah,
one's maybe doing a shoe change, whatever. Let us know what you saw at Tararira.
I mean, I've crewed people from Lake Sonoma. I've crewed Lake Sonoma 50 champions. I've crewed people at Western States like Jeff Colt. I just crewed Adrian at Tarawera 100K. And yeah, I mean, the transitions, I got a video I can send and maybe we can put it in the show notes or something, but it's the first aid station. It's like 50K in. I think Adrian was there less than 40 seconds. It was in and out. Dan Jones came in, was in half that amount of time. I don't even think Dan stopped. I think he ran through all the way and maybe stopped for a second and someone was transitioning bottles and then he was on. I mean, it's dialed in. It's almost race specific. I mean, it is race specific. I've seen things at Western States where you have two or three separate crews that are going to different aid stations because they're unreachable in the amount of time that these people are passing through. So you have a meeting several days before the race where you're all in a room. There could be 20 people in there, and you're breaking down which one is who's going where. There's team A and team B. And then team A is going to this spot and this spot. And then you got a person at each one of those. This person's handling ice. This person's handling socks. This person's handling food. This person handling gear switch out or the vest, or they're on bottle duty. And then you got a person that's actually handling the crew to make sure the crew is hydrated. And, there's so many moving parts, depending on whatever race. I think Western States might be the biggest one that I've seen because there's so many different dynamics. You're starting out in the high country and it could be 30 degrees Fahrenheit. And by the end or by the middle, it's 100 degrees and you're flying through the canyons. So gear changes, the shoes, there's so many different things. So when you're dealing with a matter of seconds in some of these aid stations, it matters, knowing are we going to swap shoes here and or the socks, all that stuff. And I think I have a video too of Jeff Colt coming through Michigan Bluff, maybe 2 years ago. He was in and out. I think I did the math, 12 seconds. There's a runner meeting him as he comes up because you can only give aid. Each race has like sections of where you can receive aid, and you want to utilize the entire thing. So as soon as Jeff popped out, right where you could start to receive aid, if somebody was running with him, getting information from him, relaying that on a walkie-talkie or whatever. That way, the people that are at the crew know exactly. All right, Jeff wants to swap out a hat. He needs a different vest. He does need ice. He needs new socks. And then when he comes up, it's like boom, it's done, and he's on. So it's dialed in. Adrian and I weren't that sophisticated at Tarawera because we're in New Zealand. So it was just Adrian and I and a Kiwi friend that he met. And basically, it was me telling this guy, like, this is what Adrian's deal is. This is what we're going to do. And Adrian gave us a pretty good run through the night before. There was only maybe 3 spots that we could see him. So it was pretty straightforward. And Adrian's dialed in. So Adrian basically is like, here's what I want. Here's what I need you to ask me. And, and there was high stakes too. There was a golden ticket online. And so it was very competitive 100K. And Dan Jones ran away pretty quick. So it was basically Adrian fighting off this super cool dude from Japan, and then he had the Terex athlete Cody Lynn behind him, and I think there was seconds. I mean, not seconds. I would say 3 to 4 minutes separating a golden ticket. I
Yeah.
mean and that could be an aid station. That could be like not knowing what's going on. And so the crew is important if you want to be successful. Then you look at like Golden Trail Series type stuff where they're racing each other down the line at the finish line. Like, Killian's
Go,
fighting off.
Killian.
Was it Philemon or Patrick? I can't remember which one. But these things matter. It is like F1 precision.
But where we can take this with the kind of that age grouper listener out there where, hey, you don't maybe need to whittle it down to seconds, but I see so many times the age group athlete who is concerned with their own performance spends way too much time in aid stations, that time has
Yeah.
a way of flying, and all of a sudden they can be doing what they're doing stopped stationary in an aid station out walking
Yeah.
and getting situated. And that's just free time. And I think we can look at, just like we look at a lot of things the elites are doing, and looking at the efficiency of aid stations and how that can relate to our own efficiency. And maybe we can go from 10 minutes at an aid stations to 2 minutes. And now you multiply that by 10 aid stations. That's, you're getting close to an hour of saving time if
Yeah.
you're just a little bit more efficient and aware and mindful of just all the dead time you're spending in the aid stations.
That
Uh,
adds up.
totally,
I
totally.
mean, for me, when I'm racing, I'm normally racing cutoffs because these races aren't designed for people like me, so I'm having to just really go through my aid stations just as quick, because we're talking seconds. There was a checkpoint in my 2023 MCC where I got there with like 15 minutes to spare, and those minutes count big time. So I had to go in and out quick.
Yeah. So where I think this is an interesting conversation segue is that I had this conversation with a few people, and this is kind of bring me back to my triathlon upbringing. But I wonder, and this is more of a question for you, a question for the audience, question for listeners who want to throw down in the comments, is that again, especially with 100-mile and 200-mile distances, are aid stations becoming too enabling? You look at some of the 200 milers out there, there's medics there that are taking care of blisters. People are getting so much help just to get up and back on the race course. Is this too enabling? We look at what was it? Trans Gran Canaria last weekend.
Yeah.
The men's winner was just over 12 hours. The cutoff is 30 hours.
Yeah. Hmm.
That's over twice the amount of time for the last finisher. And where I'm going with this is that from a coaching perspective, if we're giving people 30 hours, over twice the amount of time, and all these aid station help that enable them to keep going, is that really bad for ultra running development within the athlete? And
Hmm.
I'll use the triathlon as an example. Back in the day before there was all these qualifiers, you had to be fast enough to even just get into the race.
Right.
And so if these cutoff times are so long, that doesn't foster a development mindset for the ultra runners. And I say this because I see people wanting to get better at ultra running, and they just focus on running longer and longer and longer and running slower and slower and slower, whereas they need to foster a speed development to get better.
So I have something that goes I hear what you're saying, but like that 30-hour brings in more people that could do it. Like, let's say somebody's missing a leg, then you're going to need
Totally,
30 hours.
totally.
Or I think there maybe could be some sort of separation between like the people that are elite running and the people that just want to be there and be a part of the community. So there's like two different pools of people. Yeah, and I guess you got to just see like what I mean, what's the point of the race? Is it for the competitors that are competing, or is it for somebody that just wants to be out there and eat a 20-minute aid station and get their blisters wrapped and get their boo-boos taken care of, you know? I don't know. I mean, I can see both. I can see both sides.
See, and I guess my point is that for those who are concerned about doing better within their own self,
Yeah.
um, are they being lulled into thinking that development is all about going the distance versus coming in with a little bit more ability and speed to improve their ability? And that, from a
Yeah.
coaching point, I just wanted to get that out there is that within the proliferation and the popularity of ultra running, I think what's missed in getting better is improving your speed, not
Yeah.
your ability to endure all day.
Totally. Yeah,
And
there's
you
two
look at
different,
all
there's two
these
separate.
new, look at all these new athletes coming into the ultra game. They're coming in with speed,
Yeah. I mean, fast.
and so then what's happening is they've already brought in the speed and they're just applying endurance specific to their race distance, whereas the everyday age grouper is coming in with not that speed development and they're trying to get better by just running long, and there's a huge plateau there.
Yeah. So you're saying that to like measure your growth isn't like can you go 100 miles, but Matt rather can you go like a certain amount of miles faster?
Let's use Wamsley as an example. 13:52 5K.
Yeah, that's pretty
Okay.
quick.
Okay. What, 3:48, 1,500 meters? That's why he's good at 100 miles. Not that he can go 100 miles fast. He's fast because he has that pedigree of speed where most ultra runners in the age group department are thinking, hey, I just need to condition my body to go all day.
So here's a question that you just brought to me by the fast 5K. So are you telling me that Ingebrigtsen could come out here to Western States and beat Walmsley?
If he
Because he's got
trained
a.
that way, sure. I totally believe that.
Do you think that trail runners though? There's so what makes so the speed definitely, but do you think a trail runner has to have some sort of like real tough, like just crazy toughness? Not that like Ingebrigtsen doesn't have crazy toughness because the guy's clearly tough, but what do you think separates at that level when everybody's got speed, the person that can win 100 miles, you know, in a
I think
in a
yeah,
trail race?
definitely that combination of the physical traits and the mental capacity to, you know, continue to push now essentially from the beginning of a 24-hour race or 100 miles, whatever the distance is. They need that capacity. And I think, we saw it with Walmsley again, continuing to use him as an example, is that has his ability really changed recently from when he first started? Probably not, but he had to learn how to race. He had
Yeah,
to learn the strategy. He had to learn nutrition. And so all of his things that needed to get better really had little to do with his overall physical ability.
yeah, yeah,
It was learning the craft. And that's no different than learning the craft of a 1,500 meter. It's
yeah.
just different.
I noticed at Tarawera, the guy that came in before Adrian. I think we got to find his name. Cool dude. I don't want to just say this guy from Japan, but he ran a 2:15 marathon
Yeah. Right.
fast.
Right.
I mean, that's considered an elite marathoner, right?
Right.
Anything
Great.
below
So
like 2:18.
let's use that. That's a great example. You know, 215 is let's just use this example. That's what required to win a Terra Rara Western States. Okay.
Mhm.
Someone who's running a 3 hour marathon is not going to win Western States anymore.
Yeah.
And to run a 2:15 marathon, you've got to run a sub 4 mile, or you can't run that 2:15 marathon. So it
Right.
all trickles down. And that's my point is that to get better at the ultra running distance, you're going to do much better and much quicker in your development by improving your speed than improving your ability to go long.
I don't want to botch this guy's name. Hiroki Kai. Cool dude. He was running,
Did we meet
pretty
him
sure.
last year?
No, I don't think, different guy.
Okay.
That guy that we met last year, Yuto, he ran the 100 mile. He came in sixth.
Yeah.
Um, but Hiroki Kai, no crew. I didn't see him with a crew all day, and he took second. And he had this camera on his hat, and he's got a YouTube channel. It's pretty popular. But like, yeah, he was just blowing through these aid stations, and the whole time I'm like, he's got no crew. And then at one of the aid stations, the Blue Lake, he had a drop bag, and so he was basically crewing himself, and just he was just hammering the whole time. It was pretty impressive to watch. You know, a guy can come out, compete at that level with no crew, and then I thought maybe Adrian was going to catch him from the redwoods to the finish. I'm like, Adrian's pretty fast, and I think the guy ended up putting maybe like 10 or 15 seconds on Adrian at that spot.
Great.
And then I looked him up, and I'm like, oh, 2:15 marathoner. That makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Fast.
Gotta be fast.
He'll be at Western. I'm excited to watch him.
Yeah. No, it's gonna be fun to be there. So I think that's a good place to wrap it up. We can start talking about Western states as we get closer to June. So it's gonna be fun. So why don't you do call to action? You're good at that. What?
Well, my call to action from earlier was if you're listening and you're part of a run group, invite somebody to the run group that doesn't look like you. I think that's a good way to grow the sport of running and make somebody feel welcome. You know, and I say that as in the aspect from the disabled community. A lot of people I talk to was like, hey, why don't you go to your run group on Wednesday or whatever? And they're like, well, no one's ever invited me there. And I'm like, well, that's a pretty easy thing that we all can do, is invite someone that doesn't look like you to your next
Right.
run group.
Nice. Awesome. Well said. Good deal. All right, man. I think that's a good place to
Wrap it.
end our easy run, cool down, and we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for joining us, and look forward to
Episode
seeing
one in
you
the
guys next.
books.
Yeah, yeah.